I hope this is working. Yep, looks like it. Okay. Hi again. This is another part of my series of talking about JOeY and the nuclear bomb that hit me in 2006 in linear time. Remember, I know now that we all wrote our own scripts before we got here in this place. So I had left off with JOeY's recuperation and staying at my house and how well he was doing. He was really happy because he knew that his back was somewhat fixed. Sort of got forced into getting it fixed, but he did it. And he was at my house, as I said, and staying in one of the bedrooms. And he suddenly came out of the door one day and said, this is about 2 weeks after he got here, and he was really doing much better. And he said, Mom, I need for you to go to the library. I need for you to go to the library really right now. If you do have a library card. And I said, yes. And he said, you've got to go. You've got to go. He was just really adamant, very insistent about it. And he said, Mom, you've got to go and get the book called House of Spirits by Isabel Allende. You have to get that book. This was really shocking to me because at the time, you know, JOeY was not a book reader. Like Mike is the book reader. Mike will read, you know, 100 novels in a week. You know, but JOeY would read, you know, huge manuals on pilots' licenses. He used to like to read the biography of the Beatles. You know, he'd read things like that. But the idea that JOeY would ever in a million years read House of Spirits, which I had read years ago, and that he would be even remotely interested in Isabel Allende was like, you know, unbelievable to me. And I said, why do you need that book? And he said, you just have to get it, okay? So I said, sure, you know, and I got in my car, I went to the library. I took House of Spirits home. I brought it back to him. I handed him the book, and on the back, it was kind of an old edition, but on the back of the book was a book jacket, was a picture of Isabel Allende, and she was very young and very beautiful, and I gave it to him, and he closed the door of his room. And I thought, my God, he's going to read House of Spirits. Why? You know, JOeY doesn't read books, especially books like House of Spirits. Why would he even think of that? So 2 days later, he came out of his room and he handed me the book and he said, okay, done. I don't need it anymore. And I said, did you read it? Did you read the book? And he said, no, I wasn't supposed to read the book. And he said, but I did a drawing of Isabel Allende. And he showed me this beautiful sketch, which I have hanging in my house, of Isabel Allende. And JOeY never drew. I draw. JOeY never drew anything. He just didn't draw. JOeY didn't draw. He wasn't interested in drawing. JOeY was interested in skydiving and parachuting and swimming and snorkeling and sailing. JOeY had no interest whatsoever in drawing. So here's this incredible sketch, and he was so delighted with himself. He said, do you like it, Mom? Do you like the sketch? And I said, it's incredible. It's beautiful. And he said, doesn't she look like an angel? And I said, yes, she does. And she did. So that was like really confusing to me at the time, because the thought that he would even do that made no sense, and absolutely made no sense to me at the time. So I took the sketch and I put it in a drawer, and I thought, well, I'm just going to keep this, because JOeY drawing anything is pretty rare. And we'll get back to the sketch soon enough. A few weeks later, you know, JOeY was recuperating at my house in linear time around August of 2006, between that time period and Thanksgiving of that year. He was recuperating really well, and he wanted to go back to his apartment, which he had in town, and he was feeling a lot better. He hadn't had any drugs in his system for quite a while. He was really clear, cleared out. He had, you know, his body was, and he was starting to feel a feeling of hope that, you know, that he could keep going, you know, that he would, you know, I could see he had this feeling of hope. And he hung around with his friend Andrew, who's a wonderful young man. And Andrew told me later on that JOeY listened constantly to the song, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. He couldn't stop listening to it. It was like he was addicted to listening to Ode to Joy. And that, I found out later on, he would go over to Andrew's and just listen to it over and over again. And he wanted so much to become a part of the world again, you know, drug-free, and not having that pain. He wanted so much to just be a part of the world again. And once he told me, when he was here visiting, he said, you know, Mom, when he was here recuperating, he said, you know, Mom, I really, in many ways, am still 6 years old, and I really, in many ways, I'm still grieving my father. And I knew that, but I knew that, you know, I knew that. So on November 26th, well, it was, after Thanksgiving had occurred, I think around the 24th of that year. And I had JOeY here with Bobby and Mike, and we had a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner. And JOeY was very depressed for some reason that night, on Thanksgiving night. And I remember he was just really, really depressed. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I kept saying, are you okay? And he said, I have a lot of anxiety. You know, I said, is the world too much? You know, you're jumping back into it now. And he's like, yeah, it's a lot, you know. And Bobby and Mike were, you know, fun. They were all enjoying each other's company. I had a lot of movies for them to watch that they had watched as children. We were all enjoying each other's company. And after Thanksgiving dinner, JOeY said, you know, could you take me back to my apartment? I'm ready to go back for a little bit. And I said, sure. So I drove him back there, and I opened the door of my car, and I said, I love you, and I'll see you soon, babe. And he said, love you too. And he went upstairs to his apartment. Well, usually JOeY called me every day, and the next day I didn't hear from him. And I thought, well, he just needs some time, you know, don't stick your nose into his life's business. And then I got a little worried the next day because I hadn't heard from him again. So I called my son and my stepson, and I asked them, I said, could you find out if JOeY's okay? I haven't heard from him. And they assured me, oh, JOeY just is taking some time, maybe he's seeing a friend, you know. He'll get a hold of you. And so the next day, on the 26th and the 27th, I was really, really starting to get concerned because I hadn't heard from JOeY. Again, I felt that it would be inappropriate. I kept calling his number, but I only got the answering machine. I thought, well, he's with his friends. He might have, he might be having fun. I'm not going to call this kid every day. You don't do that to your kid. But I think deep down, I knew something was amiss in the sense that I knew that the script had played out. So on the 28th of November, I walked in. I actually had an extra key to Joey's apartment, and I thought, well, I'm going to see if he's in his apartment. I'm going to go look, and I did. I went to his apartment. I remember going up the stairs and turning left and going down to where his little apartment was in town. And I opened the door and walked in, and it was very dark in there because it was like there's only one light on. And I looked to the right and I saw he wasn't in his bed, in the bedroom. And then I went into the apartment and I said, "Joey? Joey?" And I went over and I looked and saw him sitting on the couch of his apartment, and it looks like he was wrapped in a towel. Well, he had just taken a shower. So, and he was sitting, his body was sitting there, and he had been on the computer talking to one of his friends. They were chatting, evidently, I found out later. And he was in a good mood, the chat was happy. And he was, his head was back, and he looked like he was asleep, and his hands were still on the computer. And I went over, assuming he was asleep, and the closer I got, the more I knew he had left his body. And I remember thinking, this is impossible, this is impossible. First thing, But I knew I knew he'd already left his body. And I put my hand on his face. Now, here's the part that I find amazing, that my spirit, the higher self, was wise enough to take over immediately and say, I'm taking over, took over. And I put my hand on his face and said, "Mommy is not angry at you." Because one of the things he was really concerned about was what he'd put me through. He used to tell me when he was using his body, "I'm going to be so guilty and so ashamed someday of the things that I've done to you. Taking drugs and not listening to you when you told me I should get surgery, and some of the horrible behaviors I've shown. I am so sorry," And I said, "Don't ever feel guilt. Don't ever feel sorry. You're my son. I love you no matter what." So the first thing I had to say to him was, "Mommy isn't angry at you, even for this." After that day, after I did that, then I went insane, which, of course, I lost my mind. I hit the floor. I screamed. I got dragged out by people in the apartment building into the hallway. I was screaming. I went into what they call, I was like comatose. I didn't even know what day it was. I didn't care. Nothing made sense. My worst fear had come to grab me. And I know Anita Morjani says, if we're fearful of something, it usually comes to pass if we really focus on it enough. So she was fearful of cancer. She got cancer. So my big fear was, protecting my children, thinking I could control the outcome of their lives and make sure I was the first one that left my body. That was my big fear, that they would cross first. And so I realized that, oh gee, okay. Anyway, now I know that, but I didn't know that then. I was insane, beyond insane. If you want to know the feeling of what that feels like, imagine that you've lost your child in a store. Try to go back to those days when your child was little and you lost him in a store and you couldn't find him, and the panic that sets in. Well, magnify that by infinity. That was where I was. I had lost my child to the universe, you know. That's basically how I was thinking at the time. And the universe and God and the light had taken my child. And that's where my ego was really taking over on that one. My egoic conditioning. I wanted my child back in his body. There's no way I wanted him out of his body. I wanted him in his body. So, luckily my eldest son was wise enough at the time to get in, you know, they got there, they got to me. Both of my sons came to me that day, and a number of people. And I was so angry. I kept throwing things and breaking them. I was throwing things, I remember, off my back deck, one thing after the other, just throwing and screaming because I kept saying, I can't do this. I can do the husbands. That's easy compared to this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I kept saying, I can't do this. And people were showing up all over the place, you know. And I don't remember much of it because my brain was fried, literally. My oldest son took me to a psychiatrist immediately at Bronson within the next couple days because of the look in my eyes. I had the 1,000-yard stare from shock. And so I was put on Seroquel because I was, you know, off the charts. They wanted to put me into the psych ward, and I said, luckily my spirit came through and told the psychiatrist, no, I need to be with my oldest son right now. You know, I can't be anywhere else but with my oldest son. So I laid in a stupor at his house for a week, and I laid there in this Seroquel stupor, basically, in a fetal position, in shock. There was no other way to deal with it, and I knew that. I couldn't deal with any of it. And I did go in and see JOeY's physical body lying in the gurney when they had him at the funeral home. I wanted to have them cut a little hair off, but and I did keep a little bit of his hair and put it in a little medicine pouch with some other things that meant something to me. But I really didn't realize at the time that he was right behind me. I know that now. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I had his body cremated because I felt very comfortable with that. I don't believe in, for me, putting people's bodies in the ground because it's sort of a sense of denial. You know, like they're going to wake up or something. Like, I know now we are not our bodies, or at least I'm not my body. I'm not going to say we, it's inappropriate, but I'm not my body. It's just an apparition. That's why I call myself an apparition. And I knew that enough by then that that wasn't who JOeY was anyway. And I kind of just said, you know, we'll just cremate the body because that's not JOeY. And that was a costume he was wearing. Later on, he came and told me that, but that's another story. So I did that, and I was so insane, just unbelievably insane. But I also knew that my son Bobby needed to grieve too, and he was being very strong for me, trying to be strong. And so I said, you can take me home now. You know, we need to take me home. Because I knew he wasn't going to fall apart until I was dropped off at home. He needed to fall apart. See, the one thing about when someone makes the journey into the light is a lot of people will do everything they can to avoid the pain. And the egoic mind is, you know, creates the pain because we're taught that death is the end of someone, and it's not. It's the end of merely a costume they're wearing. But I didn't know that at the time as well as I do now. So, but we all You know, you got to dive in. You really have to dive in, and you've got to fall apart. You got to let everything crumble to dust. You know, you yourself have to turn in. You have to turn into your own ashes. You have to fall into the abyss. I found that out, and I knew Bobby needed to, because I could see him holding in his tears. I could see him holding it in. I said, "This isn't good. So take me home, Bobby." So he did. And I probably stayed on my couch nonstop for 4 years. Or, you know, I didn't really know what was going on. I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, cried. How much could I cry? More than... It was oceans of crying. I couldn't stop. There was never-ending crying. Anger. Anger. I already knew about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I already thought I was such a big hotshot knowing about the 5 stages of grief. And all that crap, you know. I already thought I was pretty... My ego must have thought it knew everything about all this, but it didn't. It didn't know about this. Again, my higher self had written the script. I know that now. But, and JOeY's higher self wrote his own script. I know that now. In fact, we co-wrote. But at the time, in 2006, 2007, 2008, down the tubes she went. Down to the lowest, blackest, darkest place that anybody could go. And I realized that that was when the book learning, the book learning came in. I realized that everything I'd read, the Sumerian texts, the journey of Eshkigel, when she goes to the underworld, these are all inner journeys. Eshkigel goes to the underworld. She goes down, 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 down. And she has to discard her clothing as she goes down to the underworld. She's discarding everything. She gets down to the underworld and she has to choose, and she loses it all. She loses it all. This is a short version of the Sumerian text mythological story. She loses it all. And then she arises. She rises back. And she rises back up. But she has to go to the pit, you know, to come back and be reborn. Well, that's when the mythological studies I'd done started showing up as the experience. Then I knew I was Eshkigel. I knew what that meant then. I knew what it meant to go down, 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 down to the blackest of the blackest places. And I knew what it meant to not want to be here. And yet I knew I could not leave here, because I had 2 other sons who were still using their bodies, and found out I had a grandson on the way. So I had to stay in this kind of formless form, functioning at the lowest possible levels for years, not being able to. I do know at the beginning of the of this, I asked my spirit really got in charge. Really, higher self just said, was screaming at me. I could hear it. In essence, screaming, "You need to paint. You need to paint." And so I told my oldest son, "Drive me to Michael's art store. I need 3 giant canvases." And I did. I bought 3 huge canvases. And for 2 years, I sat and painted over and over again, stars, thousands of them, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of stars. I painted the universe, and I was looking for JOeY. I know that now. I was creating the universe. I was trying to find my son. And so in the next video I'll tell you what the Isabel Allende story was all about, and also some other things that brought me into understanding that my son was very much alive, and how the higher self and higher power and whatever you want to call it brought in what I needed to come out of the blackness. And that's next. Thanks for listening.